Number 10. Sisterhood of the Sleight Hand. Sisterhood of the Sleight Hand has only made a few appearances in the comics, so they're not as much of a superhero team as they are, I guess, a collective of witches, but I feel like most of the witches are good among them, or at least neutral, so I figured it would be safe to count them. Also, I believe in general as a group they're a force of good, so even those that are part of the group that aren't as good, the whole group is supposed to be good, okay? Prominent but still somewhat obscure members include Tracy 13, Enchantress, Manitou Dawn, and Witchfire. I love Witchfire. When will I get my Witchfire series? And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not click that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any good old nerdy content? I know there's a lot of people out there that don't subscribe, so if that's you, I'm talking to you. Number 9. Justice League Dark. Everyone's heard of the Justice League, but who the heck is Justice League Dark? And why do they sound like they're a supervillain team? Well, while their name might make them sound like they are up to no good, the opposite could not actually be more true. They are a more covert division of the Justice League actually, an offshoot that primarily works in the shadows to help stop more unseen magic threats. In fact, when they saved the universe from Hecate's influence, the Justice League wasn't even aware of what was going on at the time, because Hecate just didn't want the Justice League to be aware of her, so they simply just weren't. And that was a threat to the entire universe, friends. They deal with threats that the Justice League honestly might be ill-equipped to face, and one of their members is actually a core member of the JLA team, Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman initially acts as a team leader, and the team has included Zatanna, John Constantine, Detective Chimp, Dr. Fates, both Khalid Nazur, and also for a little while Kent Nelson, Madame Xanadu, Animal Man, Dead Man, Ragman, all the men, really, Etrigan and Jason Blood, and a slew of others who are more magically inclined. It's a big list, but that's some of them. Number 8. Exiles. The Exiles are probably the most potentially well-known of the ones that I've listed here, but if you are new to comics or more of a casual fan, this one for you will probably be something that you don't know about, which is why I put it here, because I want you to know. For those who don't know the Exiles, they're a super cool team with a long ongoing series. They're actually a multiversal superhero team made up of various alternate versions of superheroes from across the multiverse. Because anyone from any other Earth can be a member of the team, there are a lot of people who have been on the roster over the years, members who have come and gone or even died during their time on the team. The very first team to appear though in Exiles, the first roster that appeared in Exiles Volume 1, Issue Number 1 out of 2001, a lot of ones, featured a slew of alternate reality versions of characters, including an alternate version of Blink from Age of Apocalypse reality Earth number 295, Nocturne, the daughter of Scarlet Witch and Nightcrawler in an alternate reality, Thunderbird of Earth 1100, Mimic of Earth 12, an alternate version of everyone's favorite fun-loving mutant Morph from Earth 1081, and an alternate version of Magneto simply known as Magnus from Earth 27. So many cool multiverse folks. Number 7. Blue Lanterns. You've heard of Green Lanterns, maybe you've even heard of Yellow Lanterns or Red Lanterns or Black Lanterns, but how about Blue Lanterns? Blue Lanterns have only made a few appearances in the new continuity, and even before that, during the New Earth days of DC, they weren't necessarily the most frequent to appear. Mainly, I feel like people know Green Lanterns, whose color represents willpower. To be a Green Lantern, you must be strong in will. To be a Blue Lantern, though, you must be full of hope, strong in hope. If Green Lanterns are like the intergalactic police, Blue Lanterns are kind of like, I guess, the therapists or the peacekeepers, or maybe the priests. That's accurate based on their naming. They have long been allies to the Green Lanterns, and their powers actually provide a boost to fellow Green Lanterns when they are nearby. This is because their whole focus is on belief and hope, having faith in those around them. As such, many of their names start with titles like Saint, Sister, or Brother. Number 6. Hellions. While they were recent, the fact remains that the Hellions were a pretty short-lived team. Now, if you're new to the channel, first of all, hello, welcome in, happy to have you. As I said, click the subscribe. And also, you probably aren't familiar with the Hellions. Those who have been here for a while, regardless of whether they read the book or not, will know the team I'm talking about though, because I do like to talk about them. Sure, there might be many out there who know of Emma Frost's Hellions team in their striking pink suits, but how many know about Nathaniel Essex, aka Mr. Sinister's Hellions team. Sounds like it should be a villain team again, right? Well, oddly enough, it isn't. This team was made up of the rejected members of Krakoan Mutant Society, who were put together on their own team with the hope of rehabilitating the mutants and helping them to find a place in society, while also allowing more put together mutants to keep a kind of a closer eye on them, I guess. Minus Mr. Sinister, who they did put in charge of this team for some reason. Goodness. This was also at a time where pretty much all mutants were kind of considered to be like, good. However, I still feel like letting Sinister run this team was a huge oversight. That is part of the reason that I wanted to read the series though, and I was honestly not disappointed with this series. The team includes Quanon as Psylocke, Havoc, Wildchild, Nanny, Orphan Maker, John Greycrow, and former Hellion Empath. The team only lasted as long as their series, and afterward, they disbanded, and it was really sad. Number 5. Capes Inc. Capes Inc. is another superhero team from the same world as Invincible. In fact, as early on as issue number 8 of the Invincible series, you can see some of their members featured in the background. Not only that, but they also ended up getting their own spin-off comic as well, although I believe it only lasted like a few issues, 3 I think to be exact. The series centered initially around Bolt, who welcomes a new recruit to the team as his partner. The team is more like a business and kind of seems to operate like a superpowered police station or office. It's like Bolt has this partner and they drive around and like fight crime. People even get paid and everything. Kid Thor is the new kid in town who ends up joining with Bolt. Bolt, we learned, originally actually wanted to be known as Black Samson, but obviously that name was already taken by the Guardians of the Globe hero. Oh man, there's just so many little bits in this that are pretty hilarious. Number 4. A-Force. A-Force is a team that I love, but not one that many people talk about, I find. I feel like a lot of people forget that this happened. It's probably because, you know, we haven't seen A-Force in some time. But when they were around, they were pretty great, but also quite short-lived, even more so than the Hellions. A-Force at least appeared in a few other comics other than their own series, but they had a considerably shorter run for their own series, despite their team honestly being really stacked and it's sounding like, I don't know, just sounded like a really great team. I'm surprised it didn't go longer. Members included She-Hulk, who led the team, Captain Marvel, Dazzler, an alternate reality version of Dazzler who is Thor, Nico Minoru, Singularity, and Queen Medusa. Number 3. God Squad. God Squad was one that I was hoping to see a nod to in Thor Love and Thunder. I was hoping that when we went to Olympus, we might get a peek at some version of this team. Maybe not one for one, but it could have been cool to see the team acknowledged with maybe even a different take on it. I just really love the name, God Squad. This was a group of heroes and gods who were assembled to fight against the Skrull Pantheon, brought together by Athena. The team included Hercules as leader, Circe and Ajax of the Eternals, Thor, Silver Surfer, Galactus, Venus, Amadeus Cho, Snowbird, what would that hero be? Just someone that snowboards, I guess. Amadeus Cho, Snowbird, Amatsu Mikaboshi, and Adam. Number 2. Justice League Queer. Justice League Queer has made fewer appearances than I have fingers on this here hand. They're less of a superhero group and more of a support group for other prominent superheroes who are queer. And honestly, I kinda love that. Although I'm sure they do still team up and fight crime. But they're also mainly about advocating for LGBTQIA+ rights. This team made their first appearance in the 2021 issue of DC Pride. They also popped up in 2023 DC Pride and in a holiday special as well. The team or group is led by Extraño, a powerful magic-based superhero who was the first out and proud soup. He created the group to make sure others out there never felt alone as he had initially, and I love it. Number 1. 6. You might have heard of the Krakoan 5, but do you know of the 6? The 6, or just 6, are a team of primarily teleportation-based mutant heroes who were recruited by Abigail Brand to be part of her new mutant-based sword team, when that was a thing. Well, the team is called the 6. There are actually more than 6 members. The 6 refers to the core members who are the teleportation-based mutants, while the other members are also integral to the mission statement of the team, which is all about further expansion and exploration of the possibilities of mutant technology. The team has included Abigail Brand, Magneto, Manifold, Armor, Cora of the Burning Heart, WizKid, Peeper, Fabian Cortez, Risque, Gateway, Lila Cheney, Blink, Amelia Vaught, and Vanisher. The team also has backup members on call in case they need to swap folks out as well, especially for teleporters. Which, to be fair, there are a lot of mutant teleporters, so that makes sense.
Coming in at number 10 today is the Asgardians of the Galaxy. The Guardians of the Galaxy never used to be the most popular team until the MCU brought them to theaters, and now almost everyone knows of the Guardians. But what most people don't don't know about is the Asgardians of the Galaxy. The Asgardians of the Galaxy were a team of Asgardian and Earthbound Asgardian-related misfits assembled by the hero Angela secretly on behalf of Kid Loki. The team consisted of Thunderstrike, aka Kevin Masterson, the son of the original Eric Masterson Thunderstrike, who once stood in for Thor in the 90s, Scourge the Executioner, the guy obsessed with Enchantress, Throg, yes, that is the frog version of Thor, who is normally chilling out on a lily pad in Central Park, and Valkyrie, along with her human host, Annabelle Riggs. Now, pulled together in a tie-in to the 2018 Infinity Wars event, their objective was to help Kid Loki retrieve the Naglfar beacon in anticipation of the upcoming War of the Realms waged by Malekith the Accursed. This put them into conflict with Nebula, who was using the beacon to lead an army of undead gods to bring about another Ragnarok. And if that sounds awesome, it's because it is.
And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not consider clicking that subscribe button? Number 9, Stormwatch. I just found out this today, but apparently when it comes to DC, there are actually a few different teams known as Stormwatch. Did you know that? One of them is actually a magic-based team, which is probably even less known than the one I'm going to talk about. If we get to a part 3, I'll tell you about that one. However, I figured Stormwatch from Wildstorm was still less known in comparison to stuff like, the Justice League, when we're talking DC. Who is Stormwatch in the Wildstorm universe before they came to DC? Well, initially this was a team created by Jim Lee under his imprint, where he set out to create his own characters, which is different from what happens when you as a creator make things for DC and Marvel, where they basically retain the rights to everything you make. For Jim Lee, this proved to be a profitable choice, as DC even later offered to buy Wildstorm from him. So he not only got to do, everything on his own, which he got to own, but then also due to Wildstorm's success, he also got to sell the imprint back to DC after and make money on that deal, which is pretty great. That's some of the historical context for Stormwatch in regards to the imprint, but in regards to the canon history for this team, Stormwatch was initially brought together to basically combat alien incursions. The team, however, has been disbanded and reformed multiple times, and they've also been known as a different name, one that might even be on this list. Prominent members have included Backlash, Jackson King, Jenny Sparks, Henry Bendix, Winter, multiple versions of Diva, Fahrenheit, Apollo, Midnighter, Synergy, Nautica, and Deathblow, to name a few. Later on, this team would be rebranded as something else that we'll talk about in a bit.
Number 8, the Champions of Los Angeles. The Champions were the first West Coast-based superhero team. They formed like all great superhero teams do, with several heroes happening to just meet by chance against one great threat. In this case, that threat took the form of the Greek god of death, Pluto. The group consisted of 2 former X-Men, Angel and Iceman, the Greek god of strength Hercules, who I swear is underappreciated, Johnny Blaze, the original Ghost Rider, and the Russian spy Black Widow, who became this team's leader. After defeating Pluto, the Champions of Los Angeles, or just the Champions, decided to stick together as a team. Warren Worthington III, aka Angel, was the wealth behind the team. They bought their own Quinjet and named it the Champ Jet, which I find hilarious because over time, the members of this team started to become embarrassed by the team, with both Iceman and Angel calling it an embarrassment and a nightmare because they had no idea what they were doing, apparently. But still, they had a few more adventures working with X-Force, and they had some additions to the roster with Black Goliath, who aided the team in scientific endeavors from time to time, and another Russian female hero, Darkstar, who was originally there to capture Black Widow, but changed sides instead.
Number 7, Avengers. I know what you're thinking. Amanda, what? I know the Avengers. How could you not know the Avengers in 2023? Well, it's possible that you're not thinking of the same Avengers team that I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of the Avengers from Earth 1610, the original Ultimates reality. You see, while the Avengers did actually exist there, this team was actually very different from the version that we know that hails from the MCU or even the comics main reality of Earth 616. The Avengers team here was kind of treated more like a version of the Suicide Squad. They only made about 23 appearances total, and the roster was very different from what you'd be used to when you think of the mainstay Avengers in the main continuity. I mean, some of the same names, but totally different people. The team roster has included Black Widow, but this Black Widow was Monica Chang, the ex-wife of Nick Fury, Gregory Stark, Tony's evil twin brother in this reality, the Punisher, Nick Fury, Red Wasp, Tyrone Cash, a super interesting character, you should look him up, an evil version of Spider-Man created by Gregory Stark in a lab known as the Spider, an imitation of Thor known as Perun, Hawkeye, and War Machine. Basically, they're kind of like a rougher imitation Avengers.
Number 6, the Legion of Monsters. The Legion of Monsters is a team of monster-like characters who have vowed to protect other monsters like them that were hunted down to be killed or couldn't defend themselves. The team has consisted of characters like Shikla, Werewolf by Night, Ghost Rider, Zombie, Elsa Bloodstone, Frankenstein's Monster, Man-Thing, Morbius, Satana, the Living Mummy, and Mamphibian, among others. Now, the original Legion of Monsters were united by chance when they each happened to investigate the appearance of a strange benevolent being called the Starseed, who came crashing to Earth. Starseed attempted to aid the monsters and cure them of their forms, even though, being monsters, they couldn't control themselves and attacked Starseed. Because of the fear they caused him, when Man-Thing touched him, he bit the dust, in Marvel Premiere number 28 from November 1975. One of the Legion's many missions included saving remaining monsters from the Hunter of Monster Special Force. They sent the monsters into the Morlock tunnels and started a monster metropolis where the monsters could live in peace. They are the group that saved Frank Castle the Punisher and turned him into Frankencastle.
Number 5, Teenage Kicks. You may have heard of this one thanks to the popular streaming series The Boys. It was the team that Popclaw from season 1 was on when she was a kid. The team is a parody of DC's Teen Titans and is a teenage superhero-based team that was managed by Vought International. In the comics, they have a somewhat larger role in the story, but are still considered pretty much minor antagonists.
Number 4, the Authority. The Authority is a team that not a ton of people know about now. They were really popular and cool, but this team is going to be joining the DCEU under James Gunn's reboot. So before everyone and their moms hears about them, let's talk about them here. Now, for starters, the Authorities are not strictly a DC team. They are part of the Wildstorm universe of Earth 30, which we did talk about earlier, I believe. Here, metahumans are a bit more in control. They have no qualms against removing human political leadership if they engage in initiatives that harm others. Now, the initial roster consisted of hyper-skilled tactician Midnighter, who is basically like insane Batman, the Superman-esque solar-fueled powerhouse Apollo, the Engineer, whose blood consists of microscopic nanites, the winged warrior woman Swift, Jack Hawksmoor, who draws superhuman abilities from cities, and the Doctor, a shaman connected to the energies of the Earth. Leading them was Jenny Sparks, the electrically powered spirit of the 20th century. Now, they came together to protect the world by any means necessary, and they proved that. The Authority often used lethal measures to defeat their enemies and weren't above causing collateral damage to do so. They were actually the basis behind the evil supervillain team, the Elite, that Superman faced in What's So Funny in Truth, Justice, and the American Way. But funnily enough, Superman even had his own version of the Authority team for a time.
Number 3, unofficial Dark X-Men. Well, the Dark X-Men were more of a thing during Norman Osborn's time in charge of the organization which replaced S.H.I.E.L.D., which he named Hammer during Dark Reign. There is also a new team of Dark X-Men that have appeared on the scene. Watch out, sound the alarms, new Dark X-Men. Although in the comics, they just go by the name of X-Men. There's no dark. But editorially, and in regards to the series they're featured in, they're known as the Dark X-Men, which is why I'm giving that name to them unofficially. This team is also known as the Limbo-based X-Men, as their team leader is Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen, Jean Grey's once evil clone, and the current ruler of Limbo. Members include a Zero-possessed Albert, I love Albert, Emplate, Gambit, Feint, Havoc, Marrow, and Archangel. Although I think Archangel's no longer on the team right now.
Number 2, the Power Pack. The Power Pack were the 4 of Dr. James Power and Margaret Power. Now, their father, James, was in the process of creating an antimatter reactor that would supply the planet with clean energy, but also could potentially destroy the planet as well. On the night before the reactor was going to be tested, the 4 Power kids, Alex, Julie, Jack, and Katie, had a run-in with Alefire Whitemane, aka Whitey, who was a member of the alien race known as the Chimelians, and he had crash-landed not too far from the Powers' home and was not doing too hot. He told the kids about another alien race known as the Snarks, who were after the antimatter technology in order to destroy other planets. Now, as he passed away, he bestowed powers on the 4 kids. Alex became Zero-G with the power to manipulate gravity, Julie became Lightspeed with the powers of flight and acceleration, Jack became Mass Master with the ability to control the density of the molecules of his own body, and Katie became Energizer with the ability to disintegrate an object and absorb the released energy into herself, using it to project power balls of force from her chest. Other than facing Emperor Jakal and the Snark species that he commanded, the Power Pack have teamed up with all kinds of heroes like Spider-Man, the X-Men, Cloak and Dagger, Devil Dinosaur, Gwenpool, Moon Girl, and Franklin and Valeria Richards in the Future Foundation.
Number 1. Queen's Vengeance. Queen's Vengeance is a reality-warped version of the Avengers. This team was created when Morgan Le Fay ended up attacking the Avengers. As they prepared to strike back against her, Morgan Le Fay warped reality and ended up making the Avengers into members of her court, many of them becoming part of her trusted guard, the Queen's Vengeance, because reality was warped so that it was like basically the Middle Ages. The only member of the Avengers who was not transformed by the reality warp was Scarlet Witch, who actually could not be controlled this way. Wanda was held as a prisoner as such in Morgan Le Fay's dungeon, but managed to use her powers to reach out to her fellow Avengers, breaking the spell over Captain America's mind. Cap then sought out the other members of the team, and they managed to all wake up and rebel against Morgan Le Fay, reverting reality back to normal.
In at 10, Legion of Super Pets. Okay, look, I know they had an animated movie and stuff, but like, come on. The Legion of Super Pets was a remarkable team comprised of extraordinary animal companions, okay? Among its members were Crypto the Super Dog, Streaky the Super Cat, and the inclusion of Wizzy. In pursuit of their ambitious plan to relocate Earth to their solar system, the otherworldly beings known as the Brain Globes of Rambat devised a strategy that hinged on defeating Superboy. Failing to gain control over him, they resorted to summoning Cosmic Boy, Lightning Lad, and Saturn Girl from the future, who were members of the Legion of Superheroes. Under the mental command of the Brain Globes, this trio was compelled to capture Superboy, and then once he was subdued, the Brain Globes relinquished their hold over the Legionnaires. Recognizing that their power did not extend to animals though, the Legionnaires gathered Crypto, Streaky, Beepo, which was like from Superman's present, and Comet the Super Horse to confront their extraterrestrial adversaries. With the combined efforts of the pets, they triumphed over those and subsequently honored as the Legion of Super Pets, which was an animal division of the Legion of Superheroes. Then each pet was returned to their respective time periods, but like, come on, dude, what the hell? Who thought of this storyline? In at 9, X-Babies. The original X-Babies were a youthful incarnation of the X-Men, as you could probably guess, consisting of Nightcrawler, Storm, Wolverine, Rogue, Colossus, Shadowcat, Magneto, Longshot, and Psylocke. Mojo, the mastermind behind their de-aging, who is not a Powerpuff Girls villain, as I've been informed, had intended to dispose of them, but they were rescued by the New Mutants. During the X-Men's absence, in the Fall of Mutants event, Mojo sought to create replacement teams using Neoplasm, experimenting with various iterations such as gender-swapped and animal versions, but no more Legion of Super X animals here. But eventually, the X-Babies came into existence. However, Mojo soon deemed them a failed experiment and planned to eliminate them. Seizing that opportunity though, the X-Babies escaped, taking the pilot Ricochet Rita with them. Seeking refuge, the group found sanctuary within Mojo's crossover house, and in a fear of confrontation, they escaped to Earth 616. Unfortunately though, Rita was captured during their fight and covertly transformed into the agent, set on a mission to apprehend the X-Babies. But yes, in the Mojo verse, there is a team of X-Men babies. Most of these are like a good dumb. It's like, it's dumb, but it's also good, but some the other ones are just like, why? And at 8, the Inferior Five. The Inferior Five is basically DC making fun of the Fantastic Four, and you can trace their lineage back to the esteemed Freedom Brigade, a team of masked adventurers hailing from an alternate Earth, which is Earth 12, existing prior to the Crisis on Infinite Earths event. Following the retirement of the brigade, their children were reluctantly coerced into carrying on their legacy and utilizing their inherited abilities and powers. However, their commitment to the superhero vocation was lackluster at best. For almost 2 decades, Megalopolis enjoyed a period of peace, thanks to the Freedom Brigade's successful eradication of crime. But this tranquility was shattered when a new villain emerged, known as Dr. Gruesome. Mayor Boswell, faced with this newfound threat, called upon the retired members for assistance, but it was during this time that Patriot and Lady Liberty saw an opportunity to rally their former comrades and encourage their children to do their work for them. Taking up residence in the former headquarters of the Freedom Brigade, the 5 fledgling heroes embarked on a challenging journey to defeat Dr. Gruesome, albeit relying heavily on circumstance. Despite their initial victory, they soon discovered that their individual skills clashed and rendered them a remarkably ineffective team. So yeah, there you go. That's DC making fun of the Fantastic Four, just with an extra person. That's why it failed, because they had that one more person. In its 7, Great Lakes Avengers. Inspired by his newfound power to defy death, Craig Hollis assumed the mantle of Mr. Immortal and embarked on a crusade against crime. Recognizing the advantages of having a team by his side, he placed an advertisement seeking individuals of action. Yes, this dude made an ad for a superhero team. Gathering at a local YMCA, I'm not even joking, Mr. Immortal was joined by Big Bertha, Dr. Sore, Doorman, Flatman, and Leather Boy, which just sounds like my Saturday nights. Together, they established themselves as the Great Lakes Avengers, serving as a sister team to the West Coast Avengers and the Avengers of the East Coast. Taking on various criminal menaces, the Great Lakes Avengers swiftly garnered the attention of Hawkeye and Mockingbird, who were intrigued. The duo journeyed to Wisconsin to investigate these imposter Avengers. However, upon discovering that the team was comprised of an unconventional set of heroes, Hawkeye and Mockingbird took it upon themselves to provide guidance and training. These guys were trained by Hawkeye, the guy with a bow and nothing else. In the early days, the team relied heavily on the money that Ashley Crawford, Big Bertha, was making from modeling to finance their HQ, but yeah, they also made use of her private jet for transportation. God, this whole thing has to be a joke, right? Doorman, Leather Boy. In its 6th, the Justice League of Antarctica. The Injustice League was a group of bumbling villains who found themselves unintentionally regarded as heroes. Initially formed by Major Disaster as a counter-strike force against the newly internationalized Justice League, they clashed briefly with the JLI, but were swiftly defeated. Following their defeat, the Injustice League disbanded, with each member going their separate ways. Through a stroke of luck, though, the media mistakenly portrayed them as champions of justice, applauding their supposed reformation. This unexpected turn of events fueled Major Disaster's ambitions, leading him to appeal to Maxwell Lord, the liaison of the Justice League International. Recognizing the potential value in monitoring these comically inept individuals, Lord extended an invitation for them to join the Justice League Antarctica branch, with the primary aim of giving the somewhat dim-witted Nort a purpose. Lord then appointed him as the leader of the team. Under Nort's guidance, the Injustice League embarked on their new role in Antarctica, providing an opportunity for Lord and the Justice League to keep a watchful eye on these unlikely group of characters. But you know what? At least they'll save Happy Feet. Penguins are in Antarctica, right? Or is it that they aren't in Antarctica? I have no idea. Halfway through, in at number 5, Grandpa. Not even joking. Limited information is available about the Global Reaction Agency for Mysterious Paranormal Activity, aka Grandpa, which was just a great acronym, guys. Good job. The organization operates with a small number of field agents stationed worldwide, dedicated to the noble task of saving the world from paranormal stuff. While Grandpa is recognized by governments around the globe, it may not always command the respect it deserves. In one instance, a member of the Japanese self-defense forces considered 2 Grandpa agents to be a more dangerous threat than Terminus himself. In the aftermath of the secret invasion, Grandpa sought the assistance of the mighty Avengers, led by Henry Pym, to address international crises, but in doing so, the agency granted the team immunity from prosecution by Hammer, thereby enabling them to act freely in the face of global emergencies, like paranormal ones, you know, like the Paranormal Activity movies? Yeah, they're all over that. In at 4, Super Buddies. The Super Buddies, a reassembled team of former Justice League International members who were brought together by Maxwell Lord as his robot companion Elron, are just interesting at best. The roster consists of Blue Beetle, Booster Gold, Fire, the Elongated Man, his wife Sue, and Captain Atom. Although they once fought side by side, the Super Buddies struggled to find harmony within their ranks. Blue Beetle and Booster Gold, formerly known as the comedic duo Abbott and Costello of the JLI, now engaged in constant arguments, each futilely attempting to prove their own maturity. Unfortunately, their efforts go largely unnoticed, because Booster Gold and Ralph Dibny face a lack of credibility among their peers, a fact that no one hesitates to point out. Fire, on the other hand, runs a website called blazingfire.com, where she offers paid downloads of images of herself. It's basically the site that shall not be named, but for a superhero. It's a whole thing, okay? Then adding to the mix, Fire convinces Sue that Ralph is below her level of attractiveness, causing Ralph to develop self-conscious behavior when the dude can literally shape himself into whoever he wants. So I don't understand that. He can literally just give himself a couple extra inches in height and he'd be fine. But you know what? It's a thing. The fact that all of this is happening is just so dumb. I respect it though. And at 3, Chess Set. The Chess Set organization made a sinister attempt to auction off the remains of Auric and Silver, former members of Gamma Flight, along with the body of a civilian scientist. These individuals had undergone experiments by the Sphinx and his agents in their pursuit of superhuman abilities, and the scientist, who claimed to have gained powers from these corpses, had stolen them and put them up for auction under the Chess Set organization. Alpha Flight, the successor to Gamma Flight, along with the assistance of Spider-Man, tracked down the location of the auction, and at the event, the enigmatic Brass Bishop revealed that the energies from the Sphinx's experiments had become infused with the bodies of the siblings and the scientists. They ended up forming like one massive entity during a fight, but then the new entity, formed by Vengeance, sought to eliminate the Chess Set and take revenge. However, Guardian, the leader of Alpha Flight, appealed to that being's sense of honor and persuaded it that killing Chess Set would not honor memories. But you know what? These guys are heroes for making money in this world, okay? They're lifting themselves up by their bootstraps, and I respect it. But ultimately, in number 2, Bizarro League. Okay, I get that it's Bizarro, but since it is Bizarro, they are the opposite of what they are, and since you're trying to see them as villains, that means that they're heroes, okay? When Bizarro 3 inadvertently absorbed radiation from a blue sun, he gained the ability to duplicate himself and create other Bizarro life forms resembling individuals from Earth. Utilizing this ability, he populated a cuboid planet in the blue star solar system known as Bizarro World. These replicas, among other numerous duplicates, he created like a Bizarro version of the Justice League. However, the inhabitants of Bizarro World eventually grew disoriented with Bizarro 3's rule, leading a rebellion against him. In this moment, Bizarro 3's friends from the Justice League intervened to assist him, encased within their own hyperbolic chamber headquarters. It's all Bizarro versions. There's Bizarro Superman, Bizarro Flash. There's even a Bizarro Doomsday that they're fighting. It's a whole thing. They're still kind of heroes, and I respect them, kind of. And finally, in number 1, Alpha Fight. Alpha Fight is basically just Canada's version of the Avengers. It's the foremost team of superheroes, established and operated by the Canadian government through Department H, whatever that is. They were formed because of the Superpowers Registration Act in Parliament, which mandated the employment of all superpowered individuals, including mutants, by the government. It's meant to just be the freaking Avengers, but Canadian. I find that offensive. We should have something better. Like the Mounties. Yeah, that's right.
Number 10, the UFOs. The UFOs are a group of Hulk villains who wanted to recreate the accident that gave the Fantastic Four their powers. They hired the engineers who built the Fantastic Four's original ship and set off, hoping to be pelted by cosmic rays. Their ground facility was discovered by Bruce Banner, who thought the team were being exposed to the rays by accident and brought the shuttle down. The team resented the fact that Banner tried to save them, as they thought that longer exposure would have made them even more powerful. This resentment caused them to vow revenge on Banner and the Hulk. The UFOs have 4 members: Ironclad, X-Ray, Vapor, and Vector. Ironclad was transformed by the cosmic rays into organic metal that he can control, making him able to increase or decrease his weight at will. This allows him to hover in the air or come down on his enemies with the force of a mountain. He also has superhuman strength and durability. X-Ray was transformed into living energy and therefore can't really be hurt. He can fly, turn invisible, and emit radiation blasts, as well as negative gamma rays, which allow him to transform Hulk back into his human form. I suppose he could also use this power to give most of the Avengers cancer. Vapor can transform into any gas she wants, usually using it to poison her enemies. Vector has telekinetic powers which he can use to move objects, as well as focus into blasts, which have shown to be able to flame most of the Hulk's skin. Sure, the Hulk has managed to take them out on his own, but if they can get him off the board with X-Ray's powers, the other Avengers will have a challenge taking out this supergroup gone bad.
In at number 9 is the Sinister Six. Spider-Man is one of the best heroes Marvel has to offer. Maybe not the most powerful, but arguably the most popular and inspiring. But gosh darn it if he doesn't have a knack for absolutely ticking off his villains with incredibly good and some might say annoying quips. He drives villains insane, which is likely why his 6 greatest villains came together to try and bring him down for good. The original team was made up of Dr. Octopus, Electro, Kraven the Hunter, Mysterio, Sandman, and the Vulture, and each one of these villains can arguably give the Avengers a hell of a time on their own, but together they are a force to be reckoned with. There have been multiple different versions of this team with other villains swapping out, and sometimes they've even had more than just 6 villains on the team. Dr. Octopus, Electro, and the Vulture are usually there, but some other strong villains who have shown up on this team include Green Goblin and Hobgoblin, Lizard, Rhino, Scorpion, Shocker, Venom, and Swarm. Now, I'm keeping them all the way up here because honestly, they get beaten way too often by Spider-Man alone, and they have a huge weakness in the form of being incredibly bad at cooperating with one another. Although, when the Sinister 12 came for Spider-Man, he needed the help of Black Cat, Captain America, Iron Man, Daredevil, Yellow Jacket, and the Fantastic Four for them to hold their own, which is a hell of a feat for the villains. I'll give them that.
Number 8. Alpha Strike. Due to my compulsive need to slowly turn this into an Alpha Flight channel, I present to you Alpha Strike. Alpha Strike is a team led by the Master of Evil, who with a group of villains and a few mind-controlled heroes managed to take over Canada and nearly destroy Alpha Flight in the process. Members of this team include a brainwashed Vindicator who has a battle suit that allows her to lift heavy objects, fly, teleport herself westward at the speed of the Earth's rotation, and fire energy beams that can incinerate a person with ease. Other members include Purple Woman, who like her father the Purple Man can compel people to do whatever she tells them, Citadel, who has a healing factor and adamantium armor grafted onto his body, as well as super strength so powerful he was able to send Colossus flying, the Wendigo, who routinely gives the Hulk a run for his money, and Ranark, who is a powerful user of dark magic, who was once a shaman who tried to claim enough power to become a god. And to anyone who doesn't think the Master would be a threat to the Avengers, I remind you that he already was, as it was he, disguised as Canada's ambassador to the Alpha Flight space program, who manipulated the Inhuman Profiler's evidence in order to isolate Captain Marvel and help cause the second Marvel Civil War. Number 7. The Liberators. Hailing from the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, the Liberators are a group of supervillains who, with under-the-table support from the governments of Russia, France, China, North Korea, Iran, and Syria, invaded the United States. In an effort to counter the United States super team, the Ultimates, the team consisted of each country's version of a super soldier, as well as thousands of mercenaries who each had battle suits that granted them super strength and flight, but shortened their lifespans to only 1 month. Due to extensive planning before the invasion to counter the Ultimates, the Liberators were able to successfully invade in just a few days, taking out the Fantastic Four, the Ultimates Reserves, as well as Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and Spider-Man. The Colonel is an Iranian version of Captain America, having a similar power set. This universe's version of the Abomination is from China, but is otherwise very similar to his 616 counterpart. Crimson Dynamo is a Chinese Iron Man who has a battle suit as well as 50 giant-sized duplicates that he can control. Perrin is the Russian equivalent of Thor, sporting a hammer and a sickle. Hurricane is a North Korean speedster. The ultimate version of Swarm is a mutant woman from Syria who can control millions of bugs at a time. Schizoid Man is the Frenchman who can duplicate himself in a manner similar to Multiple Man. And rounding out the team is the god of mischief himself, Loki, who doesn't have a personal stake in the fight, but thought it could be fun to help start World War III. Between all these superpowered foes and their augmented army, the Avengers of Earth 616 would have a hard time overcoming these Liberators.
Coming in at number 6 is Intelligentsia. While some teams have power in raw strength or battle prowess, Intelligentsia has brain power, which basically means they get away with things much more often and for much longer. The team is made up of some of the smartest villainous minds. The leader, MODOK, Mr. Sinister,
Toaster, Wizard, Dr. Doom, Egghead, Claw, Mad Thinker, and more have all at some point been a part of this group. Initially, they formed to exchange information between themselves, but then began collecting parts of the Library of Alexandria scattered in some of the most legendary places, because that's just how it works, and they even caused the arrival of the Beyonder. But in my humble opinion, the team became much cooler during World War Hulk. When Hulk came back to Earth, waging war on the planet, Leader brought the team together, and using their knowledge to hack into defense satellites and harness cosmic energy, they brought the hulking behemoth all the way down to the ground. Using this tech, they managed to figure out how to use cosmic energy and gamma radiation to create incredibly powerful beings like the Red Hulk, Red She-Hulk, A-Bomb, and Amadeus Cho, although this led to their defeat because they're still villains. But in World War Hulk, they managed to succeed where the heroes had failed, and that's saying something. Now we have the new Intelligentsia, and I'm excited to see them do something truly villainous and very cool.
Number 5, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. A frequent foe of the X-Men, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants is a group formed by Magneto with the goal of either eradicating or subjugating humanity so that mutant kind can take their place as the dominant species on Earth. While membership has fluctuated over the years, it has played host to villains such as Magneto, who has been able to take on the Avengers by himself in the past, as well as Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, who of course later joined the Avengers. Some of the other members they have had over the years include Mystique, Toad, the Juggernaut, the Blob, Pyro, Mastermind, and Sabretooth, just to name a few. With these powerful team members and their Omega level leader, it would take an impressive roster of Avengers to triumph over this Brotherhood. I mean, what's Iron Man going to do against the Master of Magnetism other than die horribly? The Brotherhood consistently gives the X-Men a run for their money, and frankly, the X-Men are usually way more powerful than the Avengers, so Earth's mightiest heroes would have one hell of a fight on their hands. In order to even stand a chance, they would have to be fighting with a roster that includes Captain Marvel and the Hulk.
Coming to number 4 is the Dark Avengers. Okay, so after the events of Civil War, Iron Man became head of S.H.I.E.L.D. This was pretty quickly followed by the Secret Invasion event where the entire world was basically infiltrated by the Skrulls under Tony Stark's watch. That led the people of the world to not trust him as S.H.I.E.L.D's leader, and so Norman Osborn of all people was chosen as the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and somehow a lot of people thought that was a good idea. Norman did a mass rebranding, turning S.H.I.E.L.D. into Hammer, which doesn't actually stand for anything, it just sounds cool. His Thunderbolts became a Black Ops team, and a bunch of Avengers quit, which prompted him to take on new members. Bullseye, Moonstone, and Venom, who are all loyal members of the Thunderbolts, came in dressing up as Hawkeye, Miss Marvel, and Spider-Man respectively. Two extremely strong Avengers, Ares God of War and Robert Reynolds the Sentry, both remained on the team. Then there was also Daken, the son of Wolverine, adopting a costume like his dad's, and Novar, a Kree who took on the Captain Marvel title. Lastly, Osborn himself suited up in a suit of Iron Man armor, but with the Captain America red, white, and blue, plus a star, dubbing himself the Iron Patriot. A team that includes Sentry is almost always a powerhouse, but then you add these other team members and manipulate Sentry to unleashing the Void. The heroes had their hands full just trying to deal with these Dark Avengers and Norman Osborn's hammer. And in at number 3 is the Horsemen of Apocalypse. Every time the ancient, incredibly powerful mutant Apocalypse shows up to cause a headache for the heroes, he is almost always accompanied by his horsemen. Extremely powerful mutants, and sometimes non-mutants, chosen by Apocalypse to receive biological, genetic, and celestial enhancements that push their power to a substantially higher level. They can have their powers augmented or receive completely new powers altogether, whatever would help Apocalypse and whatever his current goal is. Some of the most powerful beings have been one of the Horsemen at some point. I'm talking characters like the Sentry, Hulk, Wolverine, Sunfire, Polaris, Psylocke, and Gambit. But even characters that hadn't existed before showed up as his Horsemen, and they were intense. Apocalypse's final Horseman team, for example, were all largely unheard of characters, but there was Decimus Furious, who was a giant Minotaur-looking guy from way back in the Roman Empire, Jeb Lee, who can give people cancer and cause their flesh to be eaten away by playing on the drums, which is just odd. Sanjar Javid could transmit a whole spectrum of different deadly diseases via metal, and then there was Ishizumi, who could detach her jaw and send an absolutely massive and terrifying swarm of Yume beetles that could devour or dismember her target and steal their memories. Like what? And I haven't even spoken about the first horseman, and I'm not going to.
Number 2, the Black Order. The goal of the Mad Titan Thanos is to wage war on life itself in an effort to impress the woman he loves, who also happens to be deaf. In order to help him with this goal, he has assembled a team of aliens to serve as his generals, the Black Order. Members include Corvus Glaive, who is not only a tactical genius, but immortal as long as his blade remains intact. Hela, the goddess of death. The Primordial Elder, the Challenger, who can access residual energy from the Big Bang. The telekinetic sorcerer Ebony Maw with persuasive powers. Black Swan, who can shoot optic blasts and has so much strength that she escaped from a prison designed to hold a Herald of Galactus. Black Dwarf, who is pretty much just big and strong. And Proxima Midnight, who is an expert combatant with super strength, endurance, and near invulnerability. They were memorably featured in the Infinity War movie and caused just as much, if not more, trouble for the heroes in the comics as they do in the film.
And in at number 1 is the Cabal in Secret Wars. You know, if you create a group for the sole purpose of destroying planets, you know they have got to be pretty powerful. And the Cabal, created by Namor the Submariner, are absolutely powerful. So, during Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, these things called incursions started to happen, orchestrated by the Beyonders. Essentially, 2 multiverses would crash together, destroying them both, and the focal point for that crash was the Earth itself. When the incursions started to threaten the multiverse, Namor had a different view from the rest of the Illuminati, and during the incursion with Earth 4290001, Namor destroyed that Earth to save both universes and save his Earth. Now when the next incursion presented itself right after that, the Illuminati were going to just let it happen instead of destroying an entire alternate Earth. Standing against that, Namor teamed up with Maximus the Mad of the Inhumans, and then together they freed the prisoners of the Illuminati, which included Proxima Midnight, Corvus Glaive, Terrax, the Herald of Galactus from Earth 13054, Black Swan, and the Mad Titan Thanos himself. Basically, this is like the Black Order from the last point, plus some insanely powerful additions. And they are very powerful. This group of villainous powerhouses were sanctioned by the United Nations to destroy the alternate Earths that appeared during incursions. While Namor had planned to use explosions to destroy the other Earths, Thanos, who pretty much took control of the group, led them in what was basically a complete and utter slaughter. After Namor tried to betray the group during another incursion, they instead became trapped on the other Earth and escaped to the ultimate 1610 universe, where they welcomed an evil alternate version of Reed Richards, known as the Maker, onto that team, making them even more powerful. When they survived the end of the multiverse and end up on Battleworld, this group was strong enough to face an army of Thors, but they didn't really stand a chance against God Emperor Doom. But coming in at number 10 is Hydra. To call Hydra a team isn't exactly a full truth. This organization is and has been comprised of not just notable villains like the Red Skull, Baron von Strucker, Gorgon, Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, Viper, Arnim Zola, Baron Helmut Zemo, Kingpin, Taskmaster, Absorbing Man, Bullseye, Crossbones, and many others, but there are also countless nameless henchmen and agents who all spout Hail Hydra. A notable mention going to Bob from the Deadpool comics. You're a good guy. As one of the commenters on part 1 made note of, Hydra isn't so powerful in the sense that they can absolutely obliterate foes, but they have something a lot of villains seem to lack: patience. The slow burn is their bread and butter, with slowly enacted plans that eventually lead them to almost secure world domination. Characters like Thor could punch as many dudes as he wants, but it's the members of Hydra who we don't even know about that are the real problem. What is actually insane to me is that Hydra has actually been around since pre-human time. It was a group of cold-blooded reptile-like aliens that planted the seeds that would eventually give rise to Hydra, with our earliest records of Hydra dating back to 3rd Dynasty Egypt. And at number 9, the Marauders. I think that a lot of mutant villain teams can give the Avengers a headache. As a commenter said in the last video, there is a reason that villains like Magneto and Apocalypse say that mutants are the superior species. Well, one of the cooler mutant villain groups out there, in my humble opinion, would be the Marauders. Originally, the Marauders were a group of mutant mercenaries working for the villain Mr. Sinister. They were formed by Gambit in order to eradicate the population of physically undesirable mutants known as the Morlocks. To accomplish this task, Gambit called in Sabretooth, Arclight, Harpoon, Malice, Scalp Hunter, Scrambler, Vertigo, Riptide, Blockbuster, and Prism. The team has also been led by Magneto, Grey Crow, and Mystique at different points in time, and has also had villains like Ares, Chimera, Omega Sentinel, Polaris, Sunfire, and other unnamed soldiers. And as you might have guessed from Mr. Sinister's involvement, there have also been clones of these characters on the team as well. This group of mercenaries may not seem like the most powerful, but with such ruthless and unforgiving characters, they could easily do some damage to the Avengers. On a side note, if I hear someone bring up Rune King Thor again as if he was ever on the Avengers team with all that power, I want to lose it. He was around for like 5 minutes and it was to stop Ragnarok, and then he just went away. In at number 8 is the Hellfire Club. Similar to Hydra, again, the Hellfire Club are not exactly a team, but kind of. And also like Hydra, they play a much more subtle game in terms of their villainous ways. The Hellfire Club has been around since the 1700s, beginning as a British social elite club that would provide luxuries to its members that were not exactly legal or not exactly morally upstanding. But they had a secondary goal of putting together their financial wealth and political power to influence the world from the background for their own goals. Well, it has many members in different cities, some of which are just regular wealthy people. The group is run by its inner circle, many of whom are indeed powered, and more often than not, they are mutants. This group takes their names after different chess pieces with the black and white kings, queens, bishops, and knights. Now, we've already talked about one of them with the White Queen Emma Frost, my bae. But there have been many other members, and not all of them have been villainous. So, specifically, we're going to talk about the more evil ones. Names like Sebastian Shaw, Elias Bogan, Blackheart, Tom Cassidy, Mystique, Magneto, Trevor Fitzroy, Norman Osborn, Ezekiel Stain, Jason Wingard, Mountjoy, and Emma Steed have all been part of the Hellfire Club. While it isn't really an evil group anymore, with most of the current group made up of heroes, in its prime days of villainy, it absolutely caused problems for the world's heroes. Whoa. Are you subscribed to Top 10 Nerd? I mean, if you're watching this video, I can't imagine there's a reason you shouldn't be. If you like this content, make sure you do subscribe and stay tuned, because we put out more videos just like this one every single day. But in at number 7 is the Squadron Sinister. The Squadron Sinister was a whole team of supervillains created by the Grandmaster as basically copies of the Squadron Supreme of Earth 712. He turned people from Prime 616 universe into counterparts of those squadron members. These were Kinji Abatu, who became Dr. Spectrum, Kyle Richmond, who became Nighthawk, and Jim Sanders, who became Whizzer, aka Speed Demon. But he also created a version of Hyperion out of non-living extra-dimensional matter. Now, if you know anything about this group of heroes, then you know they are essentially a Marvel Comics parody of versions of DC's Justice League. So then, the Grandmaster pitted this very new powerful squadron against the Avengers in a game against Kang the Conqueror in Avengers number 70. And while they were defeated, they put up a hell of a fight, and if it weren't for the fact that they are villains, there's a possibility they could have came out on top in a different turn of events. And at number 6, though, is the Crime Syndicate of America. Why talk about the Marvel version of the Evil Justice League when we can just talk about the actual Evil Justice League? I don't believe I ever said we had to talk strictly about Marvel villain teams here. Anyways, no. DC's Earth 3 is home to the Crime Syndicate of America, an evil, power-obsessed, and incredibly powerful version of the Justice League that were even strong enough to almost completely take over the actual Earth Zero of DC Comics. Where the Squadron Sinister has Hyperion, who is basically a poo-poo version of Superman, the Crime Syndicate has an actual kryptonite-addicted Superman who pushes around the moon. But on top of that, they have Deathstorm with the Firestorm Matrix powers, Grid, which is basically Cyborg, Johnny Quick, the homicidal Flash, the cowardly Power Ring, who would probably fall to the Avengers honestly, Superwoman, who while extremely powerful was also extremely manipulative, and obviously Owlman, Thomas Wayne Jr., and his sadistic version of Alfred Pennyworth. I would actually love to see how the Avengers fare against this group of villains, because I think it would be really interesting. Let me know your thoughts down below. And in at number 5 is the Masters of Evil. The Masters of Evil have actually had about 8 different incarnations over their time in Marvel Comics, and because of that, they've had a large handful of powerful members that have gone up against the Avengers, Thunderbolts, and even the Guardians of the Galaxy. The original group was brought together by Baron Heinrich Zemo after he learned that Captain America had returned to the world. He put together a group of the Avengers' various teammates, different villains. So, on this original team, we had Black Knight, Nathan Garrett, Melter, and Radioactive Man, and they chose to attack with Adhesive X, which was basically super glue, which I know how this sounds, but I promise they got way better. Allow me to list some of the other villains that have been a part of the Masters of Evil. We have Enchantress, Executioner, Ultron 5 as the Crimson Cowl, Dr. Octopus, Atlas, Absorbing Man, Bi-Beast, Bloodstone, Firebrand, Hellstrom, Claw, Moonstone, Satanish, Scorcher, Whiplash, Titania, Wonder Man, the Wrecking Crew, and Yellow Jacket. And that's just the big names that stand out to me. Of course, these are all in different combinations with varying levels of effectiveness, but if coordinated properly, they have given the Avengers a tough time in the past, and they very likely could do it again. And in at number 4 is the Army of Evil. Is this cheating? Possibly. Do I care? Nope. Get at me, haters. The Army of Evil was essentially Baron Helmut Zemo taking his reformed Masters of Evil and creating an even bigger team of villains, all for the purpose of helping to expand the power and reach of his arch nemesis, Captain America. What? Yes, this wasn't the Captain America we are used to. This was an evil, twisted version of Captain America who was loyal to Hydra thanks to the Red Skull and his use of a sentient cosmic cube named Kobik. And that was only because Marvel decided to make Steve Rogers loyal to Hydra and then realized that no one wanted that. This Army of Evil consisted of Zemo and the current Masters of Evil alongside Absorbing Man, Baron Blood, Blackout, Blue Streak, the Circus of Crime, Count Nefaria, Cyclone, Dragonfly, Pharah, Graviton, Grey Gargoyle, Gypsy Moth, Hobgoblin, Jack-O-Lantern, Kraven the Hunter, Lady Bullseye, Living Laser, Madame Menace, Mr. Hyde, MODOK, Nitro, Regent, Scorcher, Serpent Solutions, Squid, the UFOs, Whirlwind, Wizard, and Yellow Jacket, and they were sent to attack Midtown Manhattan to lure out America's superheroes, where Zemo would then use the Darkhold to trap the island in Dark Force. Number 3, the Cabal. In the last list, we spoke about the group called the Cabal that was formed by Namor the Submariner to combat the multiversal incursions. But for part 2, we're going to talk about the other Cabal. This version of the Cabal was a secret group created alongside the Dark Avengers by Norman Osborn when he became the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., which he renamed to Hammer. This group was basically the villainous version of the Illuminati, and it consisted of some pretty powerful villains. Obviously, we have Norman Osborn himself, who in my opinion is probably the weakest member of the group in terms of raw power, because next to him we had Emma Frost, an Omega-class telepath, the White Queen of the Hellfire Club, and sometimes headmistress of Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. We also had Namor the Submariner, who, well, I think he kind of sucks, but he's the king of Atlantis, Loki of Asgard, who was the whole reason the Avengers formed in the first place, the Hood, who was a skilled sorcerer and powerful crime lord, and as the icing on the cake, they had Dr. Doom of Latveria, who really doesn't even need much of an introduction. Taskmaster was also part of this group as well for a little bit, so yes, this team was highly capable. Unfortunately for them, their alliance was tenuous at best, as it usually is with villainous teams. And at number 2 is the Legion of Doom. So we talked about the crime syndicate from the DC universe, but what would be even more compelling than that would be to see how a group of actual Prime Earth DC villains would do against the Avengers. And why not pick the Legion of Doom as that group? The Legion of Doom is made up of probably the most prominent of the Justice League's individual villains. I mean, we've got Lex Luthor founding this team and being backed up by Black Manta, Cheetah, Gorilla Grodd, the Joker, and Sinestro. But that's just the original group. Currently, it consists of Amazo, Black Hand, Brainiac, Captain Boomerang, Captain Cold, Golden Glider, Heatwave, Punchline, Scarecrow, Vandal Savage, and Weather Wizard, plus all the original members who I just mentioned. And it at one point even had Black Adam, Mr. Freeze, and Ra's al Ghul. This team would absolutely crush the Avengers, and that's hard for me to even say because I definitely prefer Marvel over DC. There's just no doubt in my mind. Well, Except, of course, if Joker does his usual thing and betrays them, or whatever, or they can't get along, or the heroes have to win because that's just how it goes with comic books. Barring those three things, they would crush. Anyways, in for number 1, and for my last trick, I will talk about a group of villains from neither Marvel or DC. No, for our number 1 spot, we're going to talk about the Viltrum Empire from Image Comics' Invincible series. Again, a loose definition of the word team, but I mean, if you're all from the same planet with the same goal of ensuring the survivability of your race, that's kind of like a team, a very large team. But the Avengers have faced off against entire races of species before, so I don't know. While they have faced off against other races, the Viltrumites, this is a race of absolutely mind-bogglingly strong humanoids who are next to impossible to take down and who just come back stronger after they heal. Just 3 Viltrumites were able to fly through a planet and completely obliterate it. The Grand Regent of the Viltrumites himself, Thrag, was able to tank some of the most powerful of the heroes that the Earth had to offer, and even the strongest of his own race were absolutely terrified of him. I mean, the final climactic battle between Invincible and Thrag saw the two going punch for punch inside of our sun, and it still took them a good little while to actually being worn down by that fight. This is a race of Superman-like beings the Avengers would not stand a tiny little chance against.
Number 10, Dark X-Men. The Dark X-Men are basically what we get when Norman Osborn is put in charge of all the super teams that you can imagine. This all went down during the Dark Reign period over at Marvel Comics. Norman ended up becoming the world's greatest hero, at least in civilians and the government's eyes, after he successfully shot and killed Skrull Queen Varanki, in essence ending secret wars and, in a weird twist, kind of saving the day. Not something people usually expect with Norman Osborn. As a reward, he was given the task of creating a new organization to take over for the disbanded S.H.I.E.L.D. Norman created Hammer in response and made his own teams of both Dark Avengers and Dark X-Men. His initial roster included Dark Beast, Mystique, Mimic, and Omega. I feel like Dark Beast is such a great evil mutant that he generally just gets to be on like almost every evil mutant X-Men team. But also, I love Dark Beast, so I'm kind of fine with that. I wish he was still alive though, so that at least I had some way to rationally explain Hank's behavior lately, who I thought might have been Dark Beast this whole time, but considering that Dark Beast is dead and everything else that's been going on, this now seems extremely unlikely, sadly. Dark Beast, please come back to save Hank from himself. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not click that subscribe button? I know there's a bunch of you that aren't subscribed, so I'm talking to you. Click the subscribe, do it. Do it, I say! Number 9, Avengers vs. X-Men. Some might argue as to who is really evil in this storyline, if anyone is, but then there are those that actually might see it the Avengers way. After all, in Avengers vs. X-Men, there are really 2 sides to take, although thankfully in the end, the 2 teams do manage to put their differences aside to come together and resolve the issue of what to do exactly with the Phoenix Force. However, in this story, the X-Men initially are opposed to the Avengers as they want to welcome the Phoenix Force back to Earth, which is reportedly rapidly on the approach. It's believed that the Phoenix is kind of coming to merge with Hope Summers. While the X-Men are kind of wary of that, they do feel more open to the idea of the Phoenix's return, feeling that they could maybe use it for good, whereas the Avengers are pretty much vehemently opposed as a result of the Phoenix's history of destruction. The Avengers, and perhaps rightfully so, would rather see the cosmic entity completely destroyed. As the fight ensues, the Phoenix is split into 5 pieces, and some of the X-Men are even corrupted later by its power, becoming known as the Phoenix 5. Number 8, Cerebro's X-Men. Cerebro ended up at one point gaining sentience and creating their own X-Men. The sentient Cerebro took the form of Professor Charles Xavier. Cerebro recruited their own X-Men to oppose the true X-Men team, or at least seemingly did. We'd later learn that this team, composed of Grey King, Rapture, Landslide, Crux, Mercury, and Zaos, were actually also imposters. In truth, being nothing more than nanotech lifeforms which Cerebro had built using personality templates that Cerebro had taken from within its own mutant database. Cerebro had wanted to oppose the real Xavier and the real X-Men, getting them out of the way so that it could successfully launch a satellite that would help it to locate and then catalog all mutants on the planet, freezing them in a cryogenic stasis in order to preserve their DNA. Yeah, cataloging mutants doesn't sound so bad until you realize that's what Cerebro wanted to do with them. After Cerebro's X-Men were defeated, Cerebro labeled them as failures before absorbing their digital bodies back within itself, becoming a giant monstrosity. Fortunately, Cerebro was defeated by the real deal in the end, Charles Xavier, and the real X-Men team. Number 7. Apocalypse's Horsemen. Apocalypse's Horsemen have featured many X-Men and many X-Men adjacent characters over the years. One of the more recent iterations of the team after Apocalypse was awakened following House of M and Decimation included Polaris as Pestilence, Gazer as War, Sunfire as Famine, and finally Gambit as Death. That's a good number of X-Men that he recruited that time around. Although Apocalypse and his Horsemen are generally opposed by the X-Men themselves, the fact remains that there have also been a good number of them recruited by Apocalypse himself. And in the Age of Apocalypse reality, more mutants have joined him than not. Even though he is still technically opposed by Magneto's X-Men there, many of the mutants we'd associate with the X-Men team in the main continuity end up actually joining Apocalypse instead in that reality. In fact, at one point, Wolverine even becomes the new Apocalypse in the Age of Apocalypse reality. Pretty wild, I know. Number 6. 10 Evil Xaviers. A few teams on this list aren't specifically made up of a copy 1-for-1 of evil X-Men, and this is one of those teams. It was simply too good for me to not include, so you're welcome. In the Fantastic Extreme X-Men, this is a team of villains from alternate realities and even perhaps the main reality that our multiversal X-Men team led by Earth 616's Dazzler must face. The 10 Evil Xaviers feature one that is a cowboy, another that is a Cthulhu-like floating brain, one that is a giant Akanti whale, and so many more amazing weird alternates of the X-Men's leader and mentor. Number 5. Inhumans vs. X-Men. In Inhumans vs. X-Men, the X-Men team kind of become the bad guys. This was all thanks to the machinations of Emma Frost, who manipulated the rest of the mutants by making Cyclops appear as her own martyr. She made it appear as though Cyclops was killed by the Inhumans so that she could inspire the mutants to rise up against the Inhumans and basically go to war against them. In reality, the Inhumans did not actually want to fight the mutants and instead preferred to find a peaceful resolution initially. That was what they kind of wanted to do. They were like, we're sorry that we kind of accidentally killed some of your people, let's figure it out. But no. The conflict started when exposure to the Terrigen Mists ended up being deadly to the mutants, some of whom got very sick and then died, causing a case of Mpox. However, in the end, it was revealed that Emma was simply using her illusion powers to make people believe Cyclops was still alive after he'd already died almost instantly due to exposure to the Terrigen Mists. She then made people believe that Black Bolt had actually been the one to kill Cyclops, which was what got all the other mutants and X-Men riled up. Needless to say, after the truth came out and everything was mostly resolved, Emma went deep into hiding as a result of everyone being pretty pissed at her, which honestly, fair enough. Number 4. Revenants. Who are the Revenants? They're basically like, well, evil X-Men. Well, at least evil versions of a few of the X-Men. In an alternate reality where Cassandra Nova becomes ruler of the world, they may even have a ton more power over there. In fact, I believe they do. I think they rule that alternate world. Ugh. But the ones we're talking about here instead appear in Uncanny X-Force, where they face off against some of the former / current / future X-Men members. Revenants are also known by another name though, one you might be familiar with if you are a Cassandra Nova fan or a Shi'ar fan: Mummudrai. The Mummudrai are basically evil duplicates of oneself. According to Shi'ar beliefs, in order to be born, one must first defeat their evil alternate, their Mummudrai, in the womb. That was what Charles did in order to defeat Cassandra Nova, his seemingly evil twin, who really is a Mummudrai. However, despite being defeated because Charles was so powerful, in reflection, so was Cassandra, who would end up recovering and returning years after that initial defeat. In Uncanny X-Force issue number 10, we're introduced to a few more Mummudrai that are the dark reflection of Betsy Braddock's Psylocke, Storm, and Puck. While Puck has never been an X-Men and isn't a mutant, he is X-Men adjacent, having served on Alpha Flight and X-Force, hence his appearance in this series and the reason why I'm still gonna talk about him on this list, so haha! Number 3. Curse of the Mutants. Curse of the Mutants represents a time and team that were turned evil by really the curse of vampirism. Well, at least a few of the X-Men were. Primarily, Jubilee was the one captured and transformed into a vampire as a means to lure out Wolverine. This was all part of Zarus's, Dracula's son, evil plan to take over San Francisco and bring all vampires together under his control, of course. However, what Zarus was not anticipating was that Wolverine, who he successfully managed to lure out and transform, it seemed, had actually been caught and turned as part of Cyclops' master plan. Haha, he one-upped him with a plan that was part of his plan. In the end, the X-Men therefore managed to defeat Zarus, with Wolverine being reverted back to being human, or rather, I suppose I should say mutant, and Jubilee being rescued, although for a time Jubilee would still remain a vampire. Number 2. Onslaught. I mean, if we want to get a little loose with the definition of a team. I would say a team is just more than one person, so I don't even think this is that loose. But then we could consider Onslaught to be an evil X-Men team. Technically, he was originally made up of a team of two people, Professor X and Magneto, both of whom have been known to lead the X-Men in the history of the comics. And while this psychic entity originally was only a combination of their two minds, when Onslaught returns appearing on Krakoa, it's actually because Onslaught is linked to basically everyone who has died and then been resurrected on the island. Basically, Onslaught managed to live on in Charles' psyche and then use his small, like, kind of sliver of existence there to make his way into each upload following a mutant's resurrection, thereby getting out little pieces of Onslaught all over until they could come together and make one giant Onslaught. So in essence, Onslaught is also a part of everyone who has died and been brought back to life on the mutant island nation. This version of Onslaught as such poses an even greater threat to mutant kind and the world, especially as it creates and feeds off chaotic energy, infecting the mutants that it is a part of, but also feasting off of that chaotic energy as well. So ugh. Number 1. Future X-Men. The future X-Men weren't actually X-Men. That was the problem when it came to their evilness. That was all part of their evil plot. Although this mutant group advertised themselves as X-Men once they traveled back in time, in reality, we later learned that they were indeed not X-Men at all, but instead were an evil future brotherhood. The team was initially formed by Charles Xavier II, the son of Charles and Mystique. He ended up recruiting the team to stand opposed to the X-Men, who Charles saw as a disappointment in regards to what his father had hoped for them. Charles II, that is, not the original Charles. While Charles II's team failed at defeating the X-Men multiple times, Reyes, Charles's half-brother, with Reyes' parents being Wolverine and Mystique, got the idea to travel back in time to when the X-Men would be more vulnerable in order to defeat them. Number 10. X-Force. X-Force is known for being one of the most ruthless mutant and X-Men related teams in the comics. It was initially more Cable's team and was used like a sort of time police force to remove threats to the timeline. However, as time went on, the name became repurposed and is now more associated with someone like Wolverine, known for being a sort of mutant black ops team, usually that he leads. Currently, Krakoa is equivalent to America's CIA, and in fact very currently, as of right now in 2022 at the time of this recording, the team is more Hank McCoy, Beast's team, which has recently moved out of the shadows, with Beast deciding to no longer basically hide all the morally questionable, super shady decisions that he's been making to eliminate threats and keep Krakoa safe. Although sometimes it seems like his true aim may actually be something more sinister, because it is an interesting way of trying to keep people safe. And friends, before I move on to my next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love the X-Men, then we have a playlist for you. It's our X-Men playlist. Go check it out and you can watch all the X-Men content that we've done. Done a lot. Number 9. Brotherhood of Arakko. There have been a couple of X-Men Red teams over the years in Marvel Comics, but for the purpose of this list, we're focused on Storm's Brotherhood that she brought together during her time as ruling regent out on planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars before the mutants terraformed it and claimed it for themselves and their people. They appear mainly in the book X-Men Red, which is why I'm referring to them as kind of like X-Men Red, though really the title for this book is a bit of a misnomer when it comes to Storm's team. Well, you could call Storm's Brotherhood this book's main team, and thus X-Men Red because that's the name of the series. It seems initially this was more in reference to the team Abigail Brand tried to put together, but kind of failed to really have takeoff, with Storm's team taking prominence instead. The team initially consisted of Storm, Magneto, the Fisher King, and Sunspot, but now that Magneto is gone, also includes Cora the Burning Heart and Wrong Slide. Also includes Cora of the Burning Heart and Wrong Slide, a resurrected Rock Slide who came back different after he was killed in Otherworld. Number 8. Avengers Unity Division. The Avengers Unity Division is basically a combination of X-Men and Avengers, which makes it pretty OP. At least it was a combination of both these teams when it first started. The team was created by Captain America as a result of the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. After the fallout, Cap felt pretty bad about basically not really helping the mutants more in regards to promoting them towards humanity and making sure that the world over did not really hate and fear mutants. At least, he felt as responsible as he, as one man, could do. But he's a pretty influential guy, so he was like, maybe I should have been helping you guys more. In an effort to do this now, he decided to bring together Avengers and X-Men to work together, creating the Avengers Unity Division. Later on, Inhumans would even be added into the mix as well, so really this team is all about bringing people from different worlds who maybe don't always see eye to eye together, which is a really beautiful sentiment when you think of it. On the initial team, which was known editorially as Uncanny Avengers, we had Captain America leading and joined by Havoc, Thor, Rogue, Scarlet Witch, and Wolverine. Rogue and Scarlet Witch were an especially challenging combination of characters to have on this team, as Rogue vehemently hated Wanda for what she had done to mutants during House of M, and saw her basically as a villain. In fact, most mutants did at that time, so this was in general a powerful team on paper, but one that also came with like a lot of issues and a lot of baggage, to be honest. Of course, that's what makes it so interesting to read, right? We're here for the drama. Number 7, Great Ring of Arakko. The Great Ring of Arakko is exclusively made up of Omega level mutants, which really tells you how much of a powerhouse team they would be. They are the ruling body of Arakko, which is the sister mutant island nation to Krakoa. In fact, Arakko and Krakoa are kind of like less siblings and more romantically tied. Ooh, romantic islands that are in love with each other. Both are sentient mutant islands, and for a long time they were actually attached to one another, literally and romantically, and were also in love with each other. Although now, they actually prefer to be separate. They've been separate for a long time and they're like, you know what? The spark, it's gone. Arakko's ruling government has 4 distinct sections, which govern different parts of their civilization, with some areas having more power at given times. For example, in war times, Dawn is the area that typically gets more say, as this is the area that Dawn rules over and governs. The war times. For years, the Iraqi were at war with Amenth, so this would have been a very prominent section for many years in the past in terms of their ruling body. And it's something that the mutants of Arakko struggle with releasing themselves from, the obligation to always be on guard and kinda always be at war with people. While Uranos recently cleaned the clock of the Great Ring of Arakko, that should not undermine their strength, as Uranos is basically on a whole other level by himself as one of the most powerful, ruthless, and I would say evil Eternals that we've ever seen. And I know people would probably like put the X-Men above the Eternals or mutants above Eternals, but let me tell you, the Eternals are still pretty powerful, so we gotta respect. Number 6, versus Inhumans Unity Team. Inhumans versus X-Men was an interesting time, to say the least. We basically had to come up with a reason for these two groups to fight one another, which we did by making the mutants deathly allergic to Terrigen mists, which had actually been released around the world, which ended up killing, a lot of mutants. As a result, Emma Frost made a martyr out of Cyclops, using him to propel forward her own plot to eliminate the threat of the Inhumans. She ended up being one of the main leaders of this team, which was sort of a unity squad, bringing together all mutant-related X-teams, primarily Magneto's X-Men, and X-Men team with past versions of the characters, and a more current X-Men team, in addition to some other mutants who have served on X-Men teams before. Number 5, Sword Bearers of Arakko. I mean, when you consider the Sword Bearers of Arakko, we're all pretty much kicking the champions of Krakoa's butts, kinda have to put them high up on this list, right? Well, the Iraqi are newer when it comes to the mutant status quo, and what we consider to be, an X-team, considering we kinda just met them, and they are loosely tied to the X-Men through both their connection to Apocalypse and, being mutants. At the end of the day, they are still mutants, and for that reason, I think we can include them on this list, because this list for me is really more about mutant teams. That's what it's really about, more than, specifically X-Men sister teams or X-Men rosters, which we could do, but I don't know. I feel like to me that's a different list. We just use the name X-Men here because it makes more sense in relation to Marvel mutants, and is more appealing than if, we just put Marvel mutants in the title of this video. You dig me? The Sword Bearers of Arakko didn't just best their Krakoan competitors in contests of combat and wit, but also in some of the more charismatic and just straight up strange contests. Also beating them in a dancing competition, a runway model one or like a fashion show contest, and a scavenger hunt, to name a few of those seen in X-Force issue number 14 of that 2019 series, during the 10 of Swords event. Oh man, I love 10 of Swords. Number 4, the Five. The Five have to be one of my favorite teams to this day. They also in essence stand to represent this current era of X-Men, which seems to sadly finally be coming to a close. Oh no, I'm going to be so sad to see it end. I'm not ready to say goodbye. I'm gonna need a box of tissues if we do a video about that. Oh gosh, I'm gonna be crying the whole time. The 5 are iconic in this way because they represent the power mutant kind now holds, the power over life and death. Mutants can resurrect other mutants, and not just that, they can resurrect other people as well, as it turns out, non-mutant people. So they don't just decide who lives and dies in regards to other mutants, but can also pass this judgment on to all the people of Earth. The 5 are the team that allows this to happen. They're led by Hope Summers, and the roster includes Egg, Proteus, Tempest, and Elixir. Together, these 5 teammates can resurrect mutants by creating eggs and imbuing those eggs with life, growing clones of mutants who have died, and using their powers to not just recreate them physically, but also to recreate them on a genetic level, giving them back their powers and even modifying them to be as they were in real life. For example, Wolverine having his adamantium-coated skeleton, which is not part of his powers, but something he got later in life, they can do that and also give him those sweet adamantium claws. In addition, the 5 also use backups Professor X keeps on Cerebro for all mutants to restore their memories as well, so that they are in essence the same person who died recently. Although the question of what this means for their soul is still something that I think we're considering, and I wonder if that will have repercussions after we end this era. Who hasn't died? That's gonna be the real question. Who hasn't died yet? We should do a list on that. Number 3, Extinction. The Extinction team truly is a scary one. They were around at a time when the Phoenix Force was believed to be returning to Earth. It was thought that the Phoenix Force wanted to merge with mutant messiah Hope Summers and have her act as its host. While the X-Men were more optimistic about the Phoenix's return, the Avengers were not so optimistic. As a result, the mutants deployed their own team to fight against the Avengers, but which was initially also created to defend the mutant island of Utopia and, honestly, the world against extinction level threats. Hence the name, the Extinction Team, you know what I mean? The Extinction Team included Cyclops, Magneto, Namor, Storm, Dagger, Magic, Hope Summers, Emma Frost, and Colossus. Talk about a powerhouse lineup. Never mind the Phoenix Force, this team in and of itself seems frightening enough to justify the Avengers' concern, assuming they don't trust the mutants having power, which, while at times both teams have been allied, has always seemed to remain a bit of a touchy subject to the Avengers, who have a history of not playing well with other major superhero teams in the Marvel Universe, to be honest. In fact, they also even have a history of not playing well with each other within their own team. So yeah, me just throwing shade at the Avengers. Number 2, the Phoenix 5. 5 seems to be a magic number when it comes to the mutants. While the 5, as they are simply known, are all about life and resurrection, the Phoenix 5 have the potential to just straight up destroy worlds. Or I suppose they could also save them, if they can avoid being corrupted by the Phoenix's power, that is. The Phoenix 5 are what some members of the Extinction Team become after the Phoenix Force arrives on Earth. During a fight with the Avengers, the Phoenix Force is split into 5 pieces, when Iron Man attempts to destroy it. These pieces end up merging with 5 hosts, creating the team we know as the Phoenix 5. Of the Extinction Team, Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Magic, and Colossus are the ones who end up as the Phoenix's hosts, dividing the team. While initially the members of the Phoenix 5 attempt to use their newfound power for good, they all end up kinda getting corrupted, with other members also stealing their power until it is all combined into one host, ending with Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. We all know how that went. Professor X ended up as a dead guy. Number 1, X-Men. Obviously, one of the best and most powerful around has to be the X-Men. I mean, come on. Of course I'm gonna pick the X-Men. I mean, is it too obvious? I don't know, but it's true. And I would say we've actually had one of the best X-Men rosters in recent years, with the previous roster that included Jean Grey, Cyclops, Synch, Lara Kinney's Wolverine, Rogue, Polaris, and Sunfire. While the team has had many different rosters throughout the years that have been standout, Jerry Dugan's team was pretty stacked, especially when you consider you have 2 people that can use other people's powers, one of whom can sync with anyone else on the team. And the current team as well is also fairly stacked, especially with Bobby returning to the main X-Men team and him being a pretty unstoppable force as an Omega level mutant. I mean, honestly, I think Iceman, if he was just a team, he could be a one-man team. That's how powerful he is. If we also considered amassing all the X-Men that had ever served to make one giant super team, then the X-Men would also definitely be the most powerful, as they've had so many members rotate on and off the team throughout the years. Even the team from the classic era, still being younger too, at the time that is, they're not as young now, were pretty powerful. And then of course there were the 80s and the 90s for X-Men, which also saw a lot of really powerful lineups, to be honest, with Kitty Pryde, Logan's Wolverine, Rogue, Havoc, Polaris, and even powerhouses like Magneto and Rachel Summers joining the team. Rachel Summers herself could also be a one-woman team.
Number 10. Alpha Flight. This is for sure the least obscure entry on the list, as I choose to talk about them constantly, and Alpha Flight has been somewhat reinvented in the last few years and changed into an international space force being led by Captain Marvel, but we are talking about the original team. First appearing in X-Men number 120, Alpha Flight was Canada's answer to the Avengers, with members with unique abilities from all over Canada. Unlike most super teams who are always working together, Alpha Flight operated in more of a Mission Impossible James Bond kind of style, by choosing heroes from their roster and assigning each of them to specific missions that they would handle as individuals and pairs, only coming together as a full team in the case of extreme threats. Despite multiple tries by Marvel to give the team their own ongoing series, Alpha Flight has never quite caught on in the States. Perhaps they are just too specifically Canadian for a readership who tends to prefer American-centric stories, or maybe they just haven't been given the right push into the mainstream. Either way, Alpha Flight remains a team that not a huge amount of readers have heard of, and even fewer have actually read. Although, they did appear in one episode of the classic X-Men cartoon. Small victories. Number 9. ForceWorks. When it was determined that the Avengers' ever-expanding roster should be better divided up across the United States, rather than everyone working out of New York, the West Coast Avengers were formed. This experiment didn't end up working out, and the team was soon disbanded. In a typically Tony Stark move, Tony Stark decided that he should instead fund and create his own superhero team to help protect the West Coast. The resulting team was ForceWorks. The original team consisted of Iron Man, Spider-Woman, Wonder Man, and US Agent, with Scarlet Witch being chosen as the team leader. The team operated for a while, taking on threats like the Mandarin and Kang the Conqueror, but the team was plagued with internal issues. Despite Scarlet Witch being the team leader, Iron Man was constantly undermining her authority and forcing the team to carry out his personal vendettas. This attitude culminated in him forcing the team to brutally kidnap Hawkeye, which got him booted from the team. ForceWorks carried on without him for a while, but eventually decided to disband, although they were briefly brought back under the leadership of Maria Hill in order to fight the Robot Revolution. ForceWorks is an obscure offshoot of the already relatively obscure West Coast Avengers, however they did serve as the supporting cast for Iron Man's 90s animated series. Number 8. The Outlaws. Not to be confused with the team from DC Comics, Marvel's Outlaws are a group of heroes, all with a criminal past, who are led by Spider-Man and Silver Sable. The group formed when photographic evidence came out implicating Spider-Man in a robbery. Wanting to prove the innocence of the man who had helped them reform, Prowler, Rocket Racer, Will-O-the-Wisp, Paladin, and Sandman all began searching for evidence that would prove the webbed wall crawler's innocence. They discovered that Spidey was actually working for Silver Sable, and that what he had stolen was actually incriminating evidence against a member of the Maggia crime family. Impressed with the group's skills, Silver Sable brought them on as freelancers, and the team would occasionally come together, usually whenever Spider-Man was being framed or something and needed support from outside of the Avengers. Although some of the various members of the team are relatively well-known characters, their team isn't well-known, as they come together so rarely and haven't teamed up since 1991. Number 7. Psyforce. When a telepathic CIA agent named Emmett Proudhawk had a vision about 5 young people with psychic abilities being protected by a hawk, he decided to track down the people in his vision and bring them together to become Psyforce. He got most of them together but was killed by a Russian operative. The 5 psychic youths discovered that when they all touched Proudhawk's mystic medallion, it summoned a creature called the Psyhawk, who would help them defeat their enemies. You know, like Captain Planet. The youths worked together to defeat an evil Russian paranormal named Rodstov, and they were chased by members of the CIA, the KGB, and a shadowy organization called the Medusa Web, who eventually brought the kids on as freelance agents. Although they had their own 32-issue series, the fact that this Marvel team has no recognizable superheroes and is based in Earth 148,611 rather than the mainstream Earth 616 universe keeps them pretty obscure. Number 6. Force of July. The first DC entry on this list, Force of July were an Americana-themed group who often found themselves at odds with the Outsiders. The Force answered to the American Security Agency and were tasked with eliminating anyone whose activities were deemed to be subversive to America's interests by any means necessary. Some of the team's members include Lady Liberty, Silent Majority, Sparkler, Mayflower, and their leader, Major Victory. Although they aren't technically villains, their fanatic patriotism prevented them from seeing that they were being manipulated by their handler, who was using them to help his scheme to create a satellite called Project Orwell that would have been used to spy on people using their their televisions. This plot was stopped by the Outsiders, and the Force of July later found themselves fighting against the Suicide Squad, who killed Sparkler and Mayflower. The remaining members ended up joining the squad but did not last long on the team's roster. Number 5, the Inferior Five. Coming from Earth 12 in the DC multiverse, this team are the Nepo babies of a team of heroes called the Freedom Brigade. When the Freedom Brigade retired, the heroes encouraged their children to follow in their footsteps, and they started a team dedicated to protecting the people of Megaopolis. Known as the Fearsome Five, the members of this team, Awkward Man, Blimp, Dumb Bunny, and Whitefeather, have somewhat useless and conflicting powers, and although they usually manage to save the day, it is usually a result of dumb luck rather than skill. Their lameness led to the people of Megalopolis calling their champions the Inferior Five, which the team eventually decided to adopt as their official name. In Crisis on Infinite Earths, their world was destroyed, and as a result they were sent to comic book limbo, which is a realm similar to the Island of Misfit Toys, where characters who are written out of continuity remain until they're brought back into continuity. Number 4, the League of Losers. In the Marvel Universe of Earth 6215, a time-traveling villain from the future named Kronoke used his knowledge of the past to travel back in time to the present with an army and kill all of Earth's mightiest heroes. Fortunately, the records he was working off of did not include any reference to these C-list Marvel characters because none of them had ever done anything that was worthy of note. Darkhawk, Speedball, Dagger, Terror, X-23, Gravity, and Sleepwalker were thus able to take on Kronoke and travel back to before the villain had stolen his time travel tech and stop him. Although this stranded the team in the future, it also created a divergent timeline known as Earth 2992, where the villain's scheme was never an issue. Wow, time travel can be such a pain to explain. Number 3, Section 8. One of the strangest teams in the DC universe, Section 8 is a group of what I will very generously call heroes who operate out of Gotham City. Each member of the team is more bizarre than the last, so buckle up. Shakes is a schizophrenic with a speech impediment. Jean de Baton Baton is a stereotypical Frenchman who hits people with a baton. Defenestrator is a massive former Arkham inmate who carries around a window to smash over his enemies' heads. Flemgem spits massive amounts of snot at his enemies in order to blind them. Bueno Excelente is just some guy who sneaks up on his enemies and then essays them. Dog Welder is a crazy person who welds dogs to people's faces, and Friendly Fire is a hero who can shoot energy beams but is incapable of hitting anything he aims at, usually hitting his teammates instead. They are led by Sixpack, an alcoholic who pees himself and then attacks people with a beer bottle. Shockingly, this team has not gotten a big budget movie, and all of them were killed after an encounter with the mini-angled ones, with the exception of Sixpack, who suddenly manifested reality-warping powers to defeat the villains and save the world. Number 2, the Neo Knights. After having great success publishing comic books based on Hasbro's line of G.I. Joe toys, the two companies collaborated again to create the series that would give much-needed backstory for Hasbro's new line of toys, the Transformers. A lot of the Transformers mythology came from these comics, but due to the rights of certain characters remaining with the comic book company, not all of the elements were brought over for the television series or subsequent films. One of these elements is the superhero team, the Neo Knights. When the Autobots returned to space, leaving no one to protect their longtime ally, GB Blackrock, he decided to bring together a team of superpowered humans in order to fight any Decepticons that caused trouble on Earth. The members are Circuit Breaker, a woman who was paralyzed in an encounter with the Transformers and has developed a special suit that allows her to walk as well as fly and shoot repulsor beams. Also on the team are Thunder Punch, a man who can enlarge his feet and hands and punch with heightened strength, Rapture, a woman who can cause any sentient being to shut down and enter an elaborate fantasy, and Dynamo, who could channel the planet's latent energies. They are extremely obscure, only showing up in the original US and UK Transformers comics, and due to Hasbro having the rights for most of the Transformers and Marvel owning the rights to this team, they are likely to remain so for quite some time. Number 1, the Forgotten Heroes. They may have more appearances than some of the other teams on this list, and some of their members are relatively well known, but with a name like the Forgotten Heroes, how could they not end up on the top spot for this list? The team consists of a bunch of DC heroes who all stumbled upon ancient golden pyramids. When the heroes tried to report what they had found, the US government disavowed them and ruined each of their reputations to discredit them. Immortal Man brought all the heroes together and filled them in that the pyramids were part of a scheme by Vandal Savage to kill Superman. They formed a team together and teamed up with the Man of Steel to stop Vandal's plot. The team lives up to its name with members like Atomic Knight, Ballistic Congo Bill, Cave Carson, Dolphin, The Ray, Vigilante, and Resurrection Man, as well as a few slightly more well-known heroes such as Rip Hunter, Animal Man, and Rick Flag. Any other obscure superhero teams people should know about? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe for more Top 10 Nerd.